On July 8, 2012, at 11:47 a.m., Brazilian federal police officer Lieutenant Michael Torres received a radio transmission that would reopen one of the Amazon's most disturbing missing persons cases. A commercial riverboat captain had encountered a young woman stumbling along a remote tributary of the Rio Negro, approximately 180 kilometers northwest of Manaus. The woman was barefoot, wearing crude garments fashioned from animal hides and plant fibers, her skin darkened by sun exposure and covered in intricate scarring. She spoke in broken English mixed with what appeared to be an invented language, repeating the phrase "the chosen must purify" over and over. When officers approached, she collapsed, severely malnourished and dehydrated, her body bearing signs of prolonged captivity and ritualistic abuse. What investigators would soon discover was that this woman was Rebecca Ann Morrison, a 29-year-old environmental researcher from Portland, Oregon, who had vanished without a trace 3 months earlier in one of the most remote regions of the Brazilian Amazon. Her reappearance would expose a hidden cult operating in the rainforest's depths and reveal evidence of multiple victims, including skeletal remains that would shock even veteran investigators. Rebecca Ann Morrison was not a naive tourist seeking adventure. Born on March 15, 1983, in Portland, Oregon, she had earned a master's degree in environmental science from Oregon State University in 2007, focusing her research on rainforest ecosystem preservation. By 2012, she had published 7 peer-reviewed papers on Amazon biodiversity and had spent cumulative months working in field research stations throughout Brazil, Ecuador, and Peru. Her colleagues described her as methodical, cautious, and deeply respectful of indigenous communities and wilderness protocols. Rebecca spoke conversational Portuguese and had completed wilderness survival training through the National Outdoor Leadership School in 2005. She maintained detailed journals of her expeditions, always filed proper permits with local authorities, and carried satellite communication devices on every trip. Friends and family knew her as someone who took calculated risks, not reckless ones. In early April 2012, Rebecca secured a research grant from the Amazon Conservation Association to document undiscovered plant species in the Serra do Araca region, a remote area of pristine rainforest in northern Amazonas state. The project would span 6 weeks, during which she planned to establish a base camp and conduct daily surveys of the surrounding terrain. She hired 2 local guides, Carlos Martinez and John Silva, both experienced wilderness trackers with impeccable safety records. Rebecca's preparation was thorough. She purchased new camping equipment in Manaus, obtained all required permits from IBAMA, Brazilian Institute of Environment and Renewable Natural Resources, and registered her expedition plan with both the federal police and the American consulate in Manaus. Her satellite GPS tracker was programmed to send automatic location pings every 6 hours to her research supervisor, Dr. Patricia Chen, at the University of São Paulo. On April 3, 2012, Rebecca departed Manaus by chartered float plane, accompanied by her 2 guides and carrying 45 kilograms of equipment and supplies designed to last 7 weeks. The flight log, preserved in aviation records, shows the plane landed at 2:15 p.m. on a designated waterway near the planned base camp coordinates, Vandu 23, 45N, 63 degree 18, 22W. According to pilot testimony given later to investigators, the landing was routine, the weather was clear, and Rebecca appeared calm and professional as she unloaded her equipment. The pilot confirmed he would return on May 15, 2012, to extract the team from the same location. April 3, 2012, at 4:30 p.m., Rebecca sent her first satellite message to Dr. Chen. Base camp established. Weather excellent. Beginning preliminary surveys tomorrow. All systems operational. Over the following days, Rebecca maintained regular communication, sending updates every 24 to 48 hours describing plant specimens collected, wildlife observations, and the team's movements within a 10-kilometer radius of base camp. On April 11th at 7:15 a.m., she transmitted, "Discovered promising grove of unidentified Bromeliaceae species. Moving camp 3 km northeast to grid reference Delta 7. Guides report animal tracks unusual for region, investigating." This message included GPS coordinates 1-512N, 60th3 Dig 1708W. At 6:45 p.m. that evening, Rebecca sent what would be her final communication. Strange encounter today. Found abandoned structures, appears recent human activity. Guides uneasy. Documenting site tomorrow morning. Will report findings. Dr. Chen, reviewing these messages later, told investigators she found nothing alarming in Rebecca's tone, though the reference to abandoned structures was unexpected in such a remote location. On April 12th, Rebecca's automatic GPS tracker sent its scheduled 6 a.m. ping, placing her at the relocated camp coordinates. At noon, the device transmitted again from the same location. At 6 p.m., no transmission occurred. At midnight, no transmission. By April 13th, Dr. Chen grew concerned and attempted to reach Rebecca via satellite phone. The device rang but when unanswered, she sent urgent text messages. Rebecca, please respond. Confirm your status. Silence. On April 14, 2012, Dr. Chen contacted the federal police in Manaus and formally reported Rebecca Morrison and her 2 guides as missing. The search and rescue operation commenced on April 15, 2012, coordinated by the Brazilian Federal Police in partnership with the Amazonas Military Fire Department and local indigenous guides from the Yanomami community. Lieutenant Michael Torres, a veteran investigator with 12 years of experience in Amazon disappearances, took command of the operation. The SAR team consisted of 23 personnel, 12 federal police officers, 6 military firefighters trained in jungle rescue, and 5 indigenous guides with intimate knowledge of the Serra do Araca region. 2 helicopters were deployed from Manaus, equipped with thermal imaging cameras and loudspeakers. The team reached Rebecca's last known GPS coordinates on April 16th at 10:30 a.m. What they found was deeply disturbing. The camp was intact but abandoned. 2 tents remained fully erected, sleeping bags laid out as if the occupants had simply stood up and walked away. Rebecca's research equipment was present. Laptop computer, specimen collection cases, camera equipment, and notebooks filled with detailed botanical drawings and field notes dated up to April 11th. Her satellite phone and GPS tracker were discovered inside her tent. Both devices fully charged and functional. Most troubling to investigators was the presence of a half-eaten meal on a portable camp stove. The food covered in insects, but still recognizable as rice and beans, prepared perhaps 36 hours earlier. 3 backpacks containing personal items, including Rebecca's passport, credit cards, and emergency cash, remained in the tents. The only items missing were the clothes the 3 individuals had been wearing. K9 units tracked scent trails heading northeast from the camp, but the tracks vanished after approximately 800 meters, where they reached a rocky stream bed. Helicopter overflights using thermal imaging detected no human heat signatures within a 50-kilometer radius. Ground search teams established a grid pattern covering 120 square kilometers of dense rainforest over the following 9 days. Indigenous guides examined the surrounding area for signs of jaguar attacks, anaconda presence, or other wildlife threats. They found no evidence of animal predation, no blood, no torn clothing, no signs of struggle. On April 20th, searchers discovered the abandoned structures Rebecca had mentioned in her final message. Located 1.2 kilometers northeast of her camp, the site consisted of a crude wooden platform built between trees, several hand-carved wooden symbols mounted on posts, and a fire pit containing recently burned material. Forensic analysis of the ash revealed fragments of paper covered in handwritten text in English, though most was too damaged to read. One partially preserved fragment contained the phrase, "Purification through isolation brings us closer to the divine truth." The wooden symbols, photographed and catalogued, depicted geometric patterns and what appeared to be stylized human figures in various poses of supplication. These symbols matched no known indigenous art traditions in the region. Lieutenant Torres ordered the area treated as a potential crime scene, and evidence collection teams documented everything. By April 25th, after 10 days of intensive searching with no additional findings, the operation was scaled back. Search crews had covered over 200 square kilometers. questioned every riverboat operator and isolated homesteader within a 100-kilometer radius, and found no witnesses who had seen Rebecca or her guides after April 11th. On May 2, 2012, the federal police officially classified Rebecca Morrison, Carlos Martinez, and John Silva as missing persons, presumed dead due to unknown causes in the Amazon rainforest. The case file noted the unusual circumstances: the intact camp, the absence of any logical explanation for why 3 experienced individuals would abandon their equipment and simply walk into the jungle. Lieutenant Torres's report stated, "All evidence suggests the victims left their camp voluntarily, possibly under psychological duress or coercion by unknown parties. No natural explanation fits the evidence pattern." Rebecca's parents, Thomas and Linda Morrison of Portland, flew to Manaus on May 5th and spent 2 weeks assisting with the investigation, posting flyers and speaking with local media. They met with American consulate officials, who assured them the case remained open and active. The Morrison family offered a $50,000 reward for any information leading to Rebecca's discovery. No credible tips emerged. By June 2012, the case had grown cold. Brazilian media coverage faded. The families of Carlos Martinez and John Silva held memorial services, accepting the probability their loved ones had perished in the rainforest. The Morrison family returned to Oregon, devastated but with no answers. Rebecca's research grant was terminated, and her position at the Amazon Conservation Association was officially closed on June 30, 2012. Life insurance companies began processing death benefit claims for all 3 missing persons. Throughout June and early July, the rainforest kept its secrets. On July 8, 2012, at 9:15 a.m., Captain Robert Sanders was piloting his commercial riverboat, the Nossa Senhora, along a remote tributary of the Rio Negro, transporting supplies to isolated communities. Santos, age 52, had navigated these waters for 30 years and knew every inlet and sandbar. As he rounded a bend approximately 180 kilometers northwest of Manaus, he spotted what he initially thought was an injured animal on the muddy riverbank. Through binoculars, he realized it was a human figure. Santos immediately altered course and beached his boat. What he found shocked him profoundly. A young woman, emaciated and filthy, was attempting to drink water from the river using her cupped hands. She was dressed in crude garments that appeared to be sewn together from various animal hides and plant fibers. Her feet were bare and heavily calloused, her hair matted and reaching past her shoulders, filled with debris. Her skin was deeply tanned and covered in what Santos later described as systematic scarring, including geometric patterns carved into her forearms and shoulders. When Santos approached, speaking in Portuguese, the woman looked at him with an expression of confusion mixed with terror. She began speaking rapidly in English, but her words made little sense. "The chosen must purify. The teacher says we must suffer to transcend. Have you come to take me back to the temple? I tried to complete the work. I tried." Santos, recognizing this was an emergency, helped the woman aboard his boat and immediately radioed the federal police in Manaus. He wrapped her in a blanket and offered water, which she drank desperately. During the 2-hour journey back to São Gabriel da Cachoeira, the nearest town with medical facilities, the woman oscillated between periods of confused rambling and catatonic silence. At one point, she grabbed Santos's arm with surprising strength and said clearly, "There were others. They made us dig. I don't know if he's still watching." At 12:30 p.m. on July 8th, Rebecca Morrison was admitted to Hospital Regional de São Gabriel da Cachoeira in critical condition. Emergency room physician Dr. Sarah Williams conducted the initial examination. Vital signs revealed severe dehydration, a heart rate of 112 beats per minute, blood pressure of 90/60, and a body temperature of 37.8 degrees. Rebecca's weight was measured at 47 kilograms, at least 15 kilograms below healthy body mass for her height of 168 centimeters. Physical examination revealed extensive scarring across her body, geometric patterns carved into both forearms, circular burns on her shoulders consistent with repeated branding, and healed lacerations on her back, suggesting whipping or similar punishment. Her feet showed severe callousing and multiple healed fractures of the small bones. indicating prolonged barefoot walking over rough terrain. Blood tests showed severe malnutrition, vitamin B12 and D deficiency, anemia, and elevated stress hormone levels. Toxicology screening detected no drugs or alcohol but revealed elevated levels of certain plant alkaloids, consistent with consumption of ayahuasca or similar traditional psychoactive preparations. Dr. Mendez noted in her medical report, patient presents with signs of prolonged physical and psychological trauma. Scarring patterns appear ritualistic. Patient's mental state is severely compromised, exhibiting symptoms consistent with acute dissociative disorder and possible Stockholm syndrome. Patient makes references to the teacher, purification rituals, and the chosen ones. Recommend immediate psychiatric evaluation and contact with authorities. Psychiatric nurse Paul Richardson was assigned to stay with Rebecca throughout the first 48 hours. His notes documented disturbing patterns in her behavior. She would suddenly begin speaking in what sounded like glossolalia or an invented language, then snap back to English. She repeatedly asked, "Is this a test? Is the teacher watching?" and seemed convinced the hospital staff were part of some elaborate examination of her worthiness. When offered food, she initially refused, saying, "I haven't earned sustenance yet today." Only after prolonged reassurance would she eat, and even then she consumed food slowly and carefully, as if following specific rules. She avoided eye contact and flinched whenever anyone raised their voice or made sudden movements. On July 9th, at 2 p.m., Lieutenant Michael Torres arrived at the hospital accompanied by Federal Police Forensic Specialist Dr. Helen Foster. They had been alerted by San Gabriel officials that an unidentified woman matching Rebecca Morrison's description had been found. Fingerprint analysis conducted using portable equipment confirmed the woman's identity at 3:15 p.m. Rebecca Ann Morrison, missing for 87 days, had been found alive. Lieutenant Torres immediately contacted the American consulate and Rebecca's parents. DNA analysis later conducted in Manaus would provide secondary confirmation, but the fingerprints were conclusive. Thomas and Linda Morrison were notified at 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time on July 9th. They began travel arrangements immediately, catching the first available flight to Brazil. On July 10th, with a psychiatrist and victim advocate present, Lieutenant Torres conducted the first formal interview with Rebecca Morrison. The session, recorded per Brazilian legal protocols, lasted 38 minutes before Rebecca became too distressed to continue. Her testimony was fragmentary, confused, and at times contradictory, but certain details emerged consistently. Rebecca described being approached at her camp on the evening of April 11th by a group of individuals she estimated as 7 or 8 people, though she couldn't be certain. The group was led by a man she referred to only as the teacher, whom she described as approximately 50 years old, with long gray hair and beard, speaking fluent English with what might have been an American accent. "He knew my name," Rebecca told investigators. "He said he had been watching us for days. He said we had been chosen for a higher purpose. The guides tried to resist. The teacher had others with him. They had knives and machetes. He told us if we came willingly, no one would be harmed. If we resisted, he would leave our bodies for the forest." Carlos tried to argue. One of them hit him with a club. "John and I, we went with them. We thought maybe we could escape later. I thought maybe I could reason with them." Rebecca's account of the following 3 months was disjointed and incomplete. She described being taken deeper into the rainforest, walking for what she estimated as 3 days, though she admitted her sense of time became distorted. They arrived at what she called the temple, a series of caves and crude structures hidden beneath dense canopy cover. "There were maybe 15 people there," Rebecca said. "Some had been there for years, I think. They wore animal skins. They had these scars, symbols carved into their skin. The teacher said we were the chosen ones, that we had to purify ourselves through suffering and labor to achieve transcendence. He said the modern world was corrupt, and only through isolation and pain could we become worthy of the truth." When asked about Carlos Martinez and John Silva, Rebecca's composure broke completely. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "They're dead. Both dead. Carlos died first, maybe 2 weeks after we were taken. He tried to escape. They caught him. The teacher said he had failed the test. They beat him, and then they just left him. No food, no water, tied to a tree. It took days. John lasted longer, maybe a month. He got sick. Some kind of infection. They wouldn't help him. The teacher said his body was rejecting purification. I had to watch him die. They made me watch. On July 11, 2012, Lieutenant Torres convened a task force of 15 investigators to locate the captivity site Rebecca had described. The case was now being treated as multiple homicide and unlawful imprisonment. FBI Liaison Officer Special Agent Jennifer Clark, based at the American Embassy in Brasilia, joined the investigation given the American victim. Brazilian military provided 2 helicopters and a 20-person tactical unit. Rebecca was shown satellite imagery of the region and asked to identify landmarks she might remember from her forced march to the cult's location. She pointed to an area approximately 95 kilometers north-northwest of where her original camp had been, near a distinctive rock formation visible in satellite photos. She remembered crossing a river, climbing a steep ridge, and descending into a valley with unusual limestone outcroppings. On July 13th, reconnaissance teams deployed to the region Rebecca had indicated. Aerial surveys using thermal imaging detected no obvious heat signatures, but investigators knew the cult members would be skilled at concealing their presence. Ground teams began systematic searches of cave systems in the area. On July 15, 2012, at 10:45 a.m., a search team led by Federal Agent Sergeant Luke Foster discovered the compound. Hidden beneath multiple layers of camouflage netting and natural overgrowth, the site consisted of 3 modified cave entrances leading to an extensive underground chamber system, plus 4 crude structures built from logs and covered with plant material. The location's GPS coordinates were recorded as 1:48:22 63:29 Nord 40 in one of the most remote and inaccessible areas of the Serra do Aracá region. The compound was deserted but showed clear signs of recent occupation. Forensic teams spent 5 days documenting the site. The main cave chamber, approximately 15 meters deep and 8 meters wide, had been extensively modified with hand-carved channels for water drainage, smoke blackening on the ceiling from years of fires, and crude wooden platforms serving as sleeping areas. The walls were covered in elaborate drawings executed in ochre charcoal and what appeared to be blood. Geometric patterns, human figures in various poses, and extensive written text in English describing philosophical and religious concepts centered on purification through suffering. One wall contained what investigators determined was a manifesto titled The Path to Divine Truth Through Mortal Suffering. The 2,000-word text, photographed and later analyzed by cult specialists, outlined a belief system combining distorted elements of Christianity, Buddhism, and New Age philosophy centered on the idea that physical pain and absolute isolation from modern society were necessary steps to spiritual enlightenment. The author, presumably the teacher, claimed to have received visions commanding him to gather followers and guide them through transformative suffering. In a smaller cave chamber, investigators found what appeared to be a punishment area. Iron stakes driven into rock walls with leather restraints still attached. An area of floor stained with what forensic analysis confirmed was human blood, and various implements including carved wooden clubs and metal tools, whose purpose investigators found disturbing to contemplate. Outside the caves, examination revealed multiple fire pits, primitive tools fashioned from stone and bone, drying racks made from branches, and evidence of rudimentary agriculture, including papaya and cassava plants growing in cleared areas. The most significant discovery occurred on July 17th in a ravine approximately 200 meters from the main compound. Federal Agent Karen Stevens, searching the area with a K9 unit, discovered 2 graves. Both contained skeletal remains. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Richard Soares was brought to the site to conduct field examination. The first set of remains were determined to be those of a male, approximately 45-55 years old at death, with evidence of severe ante-mortem trauma, including healed rib fractures and a fractured skull that showed partial healing before death. The second set of remains were of a younger male, approximately 30-40 years old, with signs of systemic infection visible in bone deterioration patterns. DNA analysis conducted at the Federal Police Laboratory in Brasilia confirmed these remains belonged to Carlos Alberto Mendes and John Paul Silva, Rebecca Morrison's guides. Forensic pathology reports estimated time of death at approximately 10 to 12 weeks prior to discovery, consistent with Rebecca's timeline. Carlos Martinez's skull fracture showed evidence of blunt force trauma, supporting Rebecca's account of his being beaten. John Silva's remains showed bone markers consistent with severe bacterial infection, matching Rebecca's statement that he died from illness. But the grave sites revealed something more disturbing. 20 meters further into the ravine, forensic teams discovered 3 additional burial sites. These contained skeletal remains in various stages of decomposition, one set dating back possibly 3 to 5 years, based on soil analysis and bone deterioration. All 3 appeared to be adult males between ages 25 and 50. 2 showed clear signs of violent death, skull fractures, severed cervical vertebrae, and in one case a primitive stone blade fragment still embedded in a rib bone. The 3rd skeleton showed no obvious cause of death, but exhibited signs of chronic malnutrition. Cross-referencing with missing persons databases revealed shocking matches. The oldest remains were identified through dental records as belonging to Marcus David Chen, a 34-year-old adventure travel blogger from San Francisco who had disappeared in the Amazon in March 2009 while documenting remote indigenous communities. His case had been investigated but eventually closed as a presumed drowning when his empty kayak was found downstream from his last known location. No one had suspected foul play. The 2nd set of remains matched dental records of Andrew Lewis Sanders, a 41-year-old Brazilian wildlife photographer who vanished in November 2010 while on assignment in the Serra do Aracá region. His disappearance had been attributed to a possible jaguar attack after investigators found his camera equipment damaged near a game trail. The 3rd skeleton, a male approximately 28-32 years old, couldn't be immediately identified, though DNA was extracted for database comparison. This individual had suffered a violent death involving decapitation, the cervical vertebrae showing clean cutting marks, consistent with a machete or large blade. The discovery of multiple victims spanning 3 years indicated the cult had been operating far longer than initially believed and had claimed more lives than anyone suspected. Over subsequent weeks, Rebecca Morrison provided more complete testimony as her psychological state gradually stabilized. In a series of recorded interviews conducted between July 20th and August 10th, 2012, she described her captivity in harrowing detail. The cult, which called itself the Purified Collective, had been established approximately 5 years earlier by a man Rebecca knew only as Joseph, though she believed this was not his real name. Joseph, the teacher, had apparently been a former academic from somewhere in the United States, possibly with a background in philosophy or religious studies, based on his extensive knowledge and rhetorical abilities. He spoke of having experienced a revelation while traveling in South America, a vision that commanded him to establish a community dedicated to achieving spiritual transcendence through absolute rejection of modern civilization and embrace of purifying suffering. Joseph had initially traveled alone, establishing the cave compound through months of solitary labor. He began recruiting followers, primarily targeting vulnerable individuals, solo travelers, people seeking spiritual meaning, those fleeing personal crises. He would watch potential recruits from a distance, learning their routines and approach them in moments of isolation. His charisma and psychological manipulation tactics were evidently sophisticated. Rebecca described how Joseph would present his philosophy as logical and enlightened, offering purpose and meaning, slowly revealing the harsh reality of life in the cult only after recruits were already physically isolated and psychologically dependent. Daily life in the compound was brutal and highly regimented. Members rose before dawn and spent hours in forced labor, expanding the cave systems, clearing land, gathering food, and constructing increasingly elaborate ritual structures. Food was rationed to maintain members in a state of chronic hunger, which Joseph claimed enhanced spiritual clarity. Water was restricted as a form of purification. Members were required to participate in daily rituals involving hours of meditation, recitation of Joseph's philosophical texts, and physical self-mortification, including scarification, in which members would carve symbols into their own skin or the skin of others as marks of their progress toward enlightenment. Joseph maintained absolute control through a combination of charismatic authority and brutal punishment. Any questioning of his teachings, any attempt to leave, any perceived failure to adequately commit to purification resulted in severe beatings, isolation in the punishment cave, food and water deprivation, or forced labor beyond normal already harsh standards. Rebecca described witnessing numerous acts of violence during her captivity. Joseph maintained a hierarchy among cult members, with those who had been there longest and shown greatest devotion granted slight privileges and authority over newer members. This created a system where victims became perpetrators, enforcing Joseph's will on others to avoid punishment themselves. Rebecca herself had been forced to participate in scarification rituals on other members. "He broke us down," Rebecca told Dr. Costa, the forensic psychologist. "Every day was about destroying who we had been before and rebuilding us as something else. The physical pain, the hunger, the exhaustion, it never stopped. After weeks of that, you start to believe what he's saying makes sense. You start to think maybe you deserve it. Maybe this is the path." That's how he controlled us. We became complicit in our own imprisonment. Rebecca estimated the cult's population fluctuated between 12 and 18 members during her captivity. She could identify 5 individuals by physical description, but knew no real names, only cult names Joseph assigned: grace, purity, sacrifice, endurance, and truth. She believed most were American or European, based on accents and occasional linguistic clues, though several members had been there so long they rarely spoke. Rebecca's account of her escape was confused, but suggested opportunity more than planning. On approximately July 6th or 7th, she had been sent with 2 other members to gather wild papaya from trees about a kilometer from the compound. Joseph had been increasingly paranoid in recent days, claiming external forces threatened the collective, speaking of visions predicting an invasion by corrupted souls seeking to destroy their work. He had become erratic, alternating between periods of manic energy and complete withdrawal. While gathering fruit, Rebecca and the 2 others heard shouting from the direction of the compound, though the distance and dense vegetation prevented them from determining the cause. The 2 cult members immediately started back toward the caves. Rebecca, in a moment of sudden clarity, turned and ran in the opposite direction. She ran until exhaustion forced her to stop, then continued walking, using the sun to maintain a generally southwestern direction, hoping to eventually reach the Rio Negro or encounter signs of civilization. She spent approximately 3 days in the rainforest, surviving on fruit, stream water, and basic wilderness skills her previous research experience provided, before emerging at the riverbank where Captain Santos found her. Investigation into Joseph's background intensified through July and August 2012. FBI Special Agent Clark coordinated with American law enforcement to compile a profile. Using Rebecca's physical description, Caucasian male, approximately 50-55 years old, 178 cm, tall, long gray hair, trimmed beard, speaking American English with possible northeastern accent, and known details, academic background likely arrived in Brazil 2007-2008, investigators developed several possible matches. The most promising lead emerged in mid-August. A man matching Joseph's description had entered Brazil on a tourist visa in February 2007 under the name Joseph William Grant, using an American passport. Grant's background check revealed he had been an adjunct philosophy professor at several colleges in Massachusetts and Vermont during the 1990s and early 2000s. Employment records showed increasingly erratic behavior, leading to his dismissal from teaching positions. Former colleagues described him as brilliant but unstable, obsessed with ideas about human potential being constrained by modern society. He had self-published 2 books on philosophical topics in 2003 and 2005, both of which contained early versions of ideas Rebecca recognized from cult teachings. Grant's passport showed he had traveled extensively throughout South America between 2007 and 2009. Then his movements became untraceable. His American bank accounts were emptied and closed in June 2009. He had no known family, no close friends, and no digital footprint after 2009. He had effectively vanished into the Amazon. Brazilian federal police issued an arrest warrant for Joseph William Grant on August 12, 2012, charging him with multiple counts of murder, unlawful imprisonment, assault, and leading a criminal organization. Interpol circulated the warrant internationally. Search operations for Grant and remaining cult members continued through August and September. Reconnaissance teams monitored the cult compound site, but no one returned. Searches of surrounding areas found 2 abandoned campsites containing minimal supplies and more cult writings, but no people. Agent Clark's assessment, filed in late August, suggested the cult had probably dissolved following Rebecca's escape. Joseph may have interpreted her flight as a sign the compound was compromised and ordered evacuation. The remaining members likely scattered, either returning to civilization under assumed identities or disappearing deeper into the rainforest. Without knowing their real names or having photographs, tracking them would be nearly impossible. On September 15, 2012, Rebecca Morrison provided testimony before a Brazilian federal judge in Manaus regarding the deaths of Carlos Martinez and John Silva. Her detailed account, delivered over 4 hours with multiple breaks for her psychological well-being, was emotionally devastating but legally significant. She described witnessing both murders, identified Joseph William Grant as primarily responsible, and named other cult members who participated in the beatings and neglect that led to the deaths. Although the perpetrators remained at large, Rebecca's testimony was entered into the official record. The families of Carlos Martinez and John Silva attended the hearing. Both families expressed gratitude that at least they now knew what had happened to their loved ones and could provide proper burial. Carlos Martinez and John Silva were laid to rest in their hometown of São Gabriel da Cachoeira on September 22, 2012, with full honors from the local community. Rebecca Morrison attended both funerals, though she found the experience traumatic. The Brazilian government faced difficult decisions regarding the unidentified skeleton found at the cult site. DNA had been extracted and submitted to databases in Brazil, the United States, and throughout South America. Investigators also checked missing persons reports from the past decade for anyone fitting the physical profile. As of December 2012, the remains have not been identified. The individual, designated as unknown male number 1 in forensic reports, received a burial in the municipal cemetery of São Gabriel da Cachoeira on October 8, 2012, with a marker reading, "Unknown soul, lost in the Amazon, may peace find you." The case of Marcus David Chen received closure his family had never expected. Chen's parents, living in San Francisco, learned in August 2012 that their son, missing since 2009, had been murdered by a cult in the Amazon. His remains were returned to the United States in September, and he was buried in Colma, California on October 15, 2012. Andrew Lewis Sanders' family in São Paulo held a memorial service on September 29, 2012, finally able to mourn properly after 2 years of uncertainty. Brazilian federal police officially closed the investigation into Joseph William Grant and the Purified Collective on November 20, 2012, with the case classified as perpetrators at large, active warrant. The investigation remained technically open, but with no new leads emerging, active search operations ceased. Rebecca Morrison began psychiatric treatment at a private facility in Manaus, specializing in trauma recovery. Clinical psychologist Dr. Amanda Turner diagnosed her with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, complex dissociative disorder, and trauma bonding syndrome. Dr. Cydia Foz Torres explained to Rebecca's family that her patient exhibited symptoms consistent with victims of prolonged captivity and systematic abuse: hypervigilance, difficulty trusting others, flashbacks, nightmares, dissociative episodes, and profound guilt over surviving when others did not. The scarring on Rebecca's body, while physically healed, served as constant reminders of her ordeal. Treatment involved multiple approaches: cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing. For trauma processing, group therapy with other survivors of cult abuse, and careful psychiatric medication management. Dr. Rebecca remained in Brazil through October 2012, too unstable to travel and needing intensive daily treatment. Her parents stayed with her, renting an apartment in Manaus, providing support while struggling with their own trauma at what their daughter had endured. By November, Rebecca showed enough progress that Dr. Torres cleared her for travel back to the United States. On November 18, 2012, Rebecca returned to Portland with her parents. She continued treatment with trauma specialists in Oregon, attending therapy 3 times per week and participating in a support group for survivors of captivity. Friends who saw her reported she seemed like a different person. Quiet, withdrawn, easily startled, struggling with the simplest aspects of normal life. Grocery stores overwhelmed her with too many choices. Restaurants made her uncomfortable with their noise and crowds. She had difficulty sleeping without nightmares. Simple questions about her plans or preferences triggered anxiety, as the cult had conditioned her to defer all decisions to Joseph's authority. Recovery, Dr. Torres and her American therapists emphasized, would be a process measured in years, not months. Rebecca herself told a victim advocate in December, "I'm alive and I know I should be grateful for that, but the person I was before is gone. I'm trying to figure out who I'm supposed to be now, and I don't know if I'll ever find that answer." The Morrison family sued the Brazilian government and the Amazon Conservation Association in December 2012, alleging inadequate safety protocols for researchers working in remote regions. Their attorney argued that while the attack itself was unforeseeable, better tracking systems and faster response protocols might have enabled earlier rescue. The lawsuit sought damages to cover Rebecca's medical and psychiatric treatment costs, which were estimated to exceed $300,000 over the next 5 years. Brazilian authorities responded by implementing new requirements for all research permits issued for work in remote Amazon regions. As of January 2013, all researchers must carry emergency beacon devices that transmit real-time GPS data and allow immediate two-way communication with authorities. Solo expeditions into regions classified as extreme remote are now prohibited. All research teams must include at least 3 people, and all guides must complete new safety training programs focused on recognizing threats from isolated extremist groups. The Brazilian Federal Police established a dedicated task force to investigate reports of isolated cult activity in the Amazon and to monitor individuals exhibiting concerning patterns of behavior in remote regions. Several similar cases emerged during the investigation. A review of missing persons reports from the northern Amazon over the past decade revealed at least 8 cases with unusual similarities: experienced outdoor professionals vanishing without trace, intact campsites abandoned, no evidence of animal predation or natural disaster. 3 of these cases involved American citizens. While investigators could not definitively link all these disappearances to the Purified Collective or other cults, the pattern suggested a broader problem than previously recognized. Agent Clark's final report to the FBI, submitted in December 2012, recommended increased cooperation between American and Brazilian law enforcement on missing persons cases in remote regions and greater awareness among travelers about risks beyond natural hazards. On December 27, 2012, 6 months after her rescue, Rebecca Morrison granted a single interview to a journalist from a major American magazine. The interview, conducted at an undisclosed location in Oregon, with her therapist present, revealed a woman still profoundly affected by her experience, but determined to raise awareness. "People think the Amazon's dangers are jaguars and snakes and getting lost," Rebecca said. "They don't think about the human threats. They don't think about what can happen when someone with a twisted ideology decides that remote wilderness is the perfect place to hurt people. I want other researchers, other travelers to understand that wilderness can hide more than wildlife. It can hide human predators who see isolation as opportunity." When asked about Joseph and the cult members who remain at large, Rebecca's expression hardened. "Part of me hopes they're still out there in the jungle, still suffering the way they made us suffer. Another part of me knows that probably some of them have slipped back into normal society, pretending to be regular people while carrying what they did with them. I think about that sometimes, about whether I might pass one of them on a street someday and not even know it. That's part of what makes sleep so hard." Rebecca confirmed she had not returned to scientific research and had no plans to do so. "That part of my life is over," she said. "I can't even look at pictures of rainforests without feeling sick. My career is gone. A lot of myself is gone. I'm trying to build something new, but I don't know what that looks like yet." Her parents, interviewed separately, spoke of their daughter's courage, but acknowledged the profound changes in her. "She survived something unimaginable," Linda Morrison said. "But survival has a cost. We got Rebecca back physically, but the daughter we knew is someone we glimpse only occasionally now. We're grateful she's alive and we'll support her forever, but we also grieve for who she was before." As of December 2012, Joseph William Grant has not been located. Brazilian federal police maintain active surveillance of ports, airports, and border crossings, but intelligence suggests Grant may have died in the rainforest, either from natural causes or possibly by suicide after the cult's dissolution. Alternatively, he may have established a new identity and left Brazil, or he could be living in extreme isolation deeper in the Amazon, beyond the reach of authorities. None of the other cult members have been definitively identified or located. The compound remains under periodic surveillance but shows no signs of reoccupation. The case of unknown male number 1, the unidentified skeleton found at the compound, remains open. His family, if he has one, do not know what happened to him or where he rests. The Amazon continues to hold its secrets. The Serra do Aracá region, covering thousands of square kilometers of some of the most remote and inaccessible terrain on Earth, could conceal other camps, other victims, other stories that will never be told. Indigenous guides who work in the region report occasionally finding strange signs, abandoned structures that matched no local tradition, carved symbols on trees, evidence of human presence in areas where no one should be. Most of these findings are never reported, dismissed as curiosities, or simply noted and forgotten as the forest reclaims whatever humans briefly imposed upon it. Rebecca Morrison's case revealed what many law enforcement officials privately acknowledged, that the Amazon's vastness and inaccessibility make it a perfect refuge not just for endangered species and indigenous communities, but also for those fleeing justice or seeking places to act without witnesses. The rainforest that protects biodiversity also protects human predators, and while Rebecca survived, 5 other people did not. Carlos Martinez, John Silva, Marcus Chen, Andrew Sanders, and unknown male number 1 all lost their lives to a madman's vision of purification through suffering. Their deaths were unnecessary, preventable, and the result of human evil, not natural hazard. That perhaps is the most disturbing lesson, that wilderness exploration's greatest danger may not be nature, but what humans can become when freed from civilization's constraints and oversight. As Rebecca Morrison continues her difficult recovery in Oregon, supported by family and professional care, the Amazon flows on, indifferent to human suffering. The Rio Negro continues its ancient path through endless forest. The caves where she was held slowly return to their natural state, erosion and vegetation gradually erasing evidence of human modification. Within a few years, only those who know where to look will find any trace that the purified collective ever existed. But the trauma it inflicted will persist far longer, embedded in Rebecca's memory, in the grief of families who lost loved ones, in the unanswered questions that haunt anyone who studies the case. How many other Joseph Grants are out there, hiding in remote places, building their own twisted kingdoms? How many other victims suffered and died unknown? How many people vanished into wilderness not through accident or animal attack, but through human malice? These questions have no answers. They exist as uncomfortable reminders that maps showing empty spaces marked unexplored might contain more than uncontacted tribes and undiscovered species. They might contain places where the worst of human nature flourishes in darkness, beyond the reach of law and witnesses, where the cost of isolation is measured not in logistical challenges, but in human lives, lost to brutality and madness. Rebecca Morrison survived. But her survival came at a price that can never be fully calculated or repaid. And somewhere in the vast Amazon, possibly watching news reports, possibly dead, possibly starting again with new victims, Joseph William Grant remains free. The rainforest keeps its secrets, and we are left to wonder what other horrors it conceals beneath its endless canopy.